That was.
I now call this regular monthly meeting of the MRH Board of Education to order at 7 p.m. on October 19th, 2023. If you could all please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have anyone for public comment tonight?
We do not.
Madam President, I know I'm not on the agenda for public comment, but I did just want to acknowledge the heaviness of the current world events and acknowledge that they may be impacting individuals who are here tonight and individuals in our community, whether they're Jewish or Muslim or just human beings. So just lifting up a little extra care and consideration in our community this evening and around the world.
Thank you, Katie. We'll move on to item 2.01, approval of the consent agenda. Can I get a motion and a second?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.01, construction change orders.
Good evening, everyone. Just a couple of changes on this month's change order docket. They're listed here in the agenda. Just a parapet wall, that's the space between the new building and the old building. We had to come up with a revised way to span those two spaces so that there was not water infiltration on either building or in between. We needed to pay to store the elevator a little bit longer than initially anticipated. And we had to modify some concrete paving over on the west side by the cafeteria. The total is before you at $11,605.23. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Chris. No questions. We'll go ahead and move on to item 4.01, our MSIP 6 update from Rachel Ward.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Ward. My title is Coordinator of Assessment, Data, and Accountability for the district. I am here to give you a quick snapshot of our status of our attendance right now and its connection to MSIP 6. So as you know, MSIP 6 is our accountability measure, Missouri School Improvement Program, and we're on the 6th iteration of that. Sorry. Really quickly, if you want to go ahead, a reminder of how our overall MSIP score is calculated. 70% of it is going to come from students' achievement, their growth, success-ready measures, which is like CCR points, graduate follow-ups, that's the ACT, things like that. That's 70%. We also have 30%, which is connected to our school improvement plan. The climate survey and attendance falls into this 30%. So I'm just giving you a quick update on our attendance. Okay. So first I wanted to describe how the proportional attendance is calculated. So we get paid, like for funding, by hours that students are present. So that's how, so just if they're here for 10 hours, we get some money for that through a very fun formula that he can explain to you. But I'm here to talk about the proportional attendance weight and how we get points for MSIP. So they take the total hours that a student is enrolled in our district divided by the total calendar hours, so how many are possible for that school year for a student. And they figure out how much is that student's potential, how much hours could they be here. So if a student enrolls late in the school year or leaves early, or if they're a part-time student, that changes. So not every student is one full day in that regard. Then they look at how much time was that student here for their attendance. When they were enrolled, how much, what was their attendance percentage? Then we get a point for anywhere from 0 to 0.2, 0.5, or 1 point based on those attendance bands. The goal for DESE, for the MSIP 6 goal, is you want 90% of your students here 90% of the time. So then after they figure out how many points you get for that student's attendance, then they multiply those two together, and And then the next slide. They add all that up together and divide out of the possible, and then you get points. So our district in each building will get a 0, 2, 3, or a 4 based on the ranges that their total proportional attendance came out to be. So this is not just attended out of possible. This is all that math around their, did they fall within 90%, and what weight was their enrollment. So those are the targets. Again, MSIP 6 wants 90% of the students here 90% of the time. That would give us our full 4 points. Any questions on how it's calculated and how we get our points for attendance? Okay, great. So the next slide, you can see in 2022, so this is actually the 21-22 school year. So this has happened right after COVID. We were virtual part of that time. That was a year. Our 78.7% was our proportional attendance, so we got 0 points based on the chart on the previous slide. Then last year, for the 22-23 school year, so they have not officially released our APR, so we don't, but all the reports that we run, our preliminary attendance will be 82.1% for last school year, which will give us 2 points for the district. And then this year, at this exact moment, as of 10/1, so I ran this report to include just August and September, essentially. So if the school year ended at that time, based on our current enrollments and the current possible amount of time in this school year, we would be at 85.3% of our students that are getting points for us within that 90, between 85 to 90%, which gives us 3 MSIP points at this exact time. And then this is just, a lot of times we dig down into this in our attendance meetings and we say, who is here, who's not coming? And this has been some trends we've been keeping our eyes on since the pandemic. And you can see there is some significant variance between our subgroups. And also you can see that all subgroups have improved as we distance ourselves from that pandemic. Any questions for me?
Could you go back to the last slide?
Absolutely.
Can you talk to us about what strategies that you're aware of? I know this happens at the building level, but what strategies have been employed to move us up? And within our subgroups, what are we doing specifically to close the gap this year in our different categories?
So the biggest strategy that I am aware of has been putting attention on attendance, has been really targeting it, running the reports, having meetings talking about it. I think with the pandemic, attendance kind of became a thing that it just changed the way that we all talked about it and looked at attendance, but we also showed us how important it was for students to be in school with teachers. And so we have just been really, really consistent with pulling the numbers and looking at it, who is not here, trying to get it documented and click follow through. I don't know if Dr. Jameson could speak more to the subgroup targeting.
Yes, so each of the buildings actually has attendance meetings monthly, and in those meetings they have conversations around strategies for specific students. Some of the students may participate in like check in, check out, where a group of teachers are actually meeting with them. And these are also conversations that I have with the data dives that we do when our data is released, and also when we have our collaborations and meet. So what are those specific strategies, and also using the communication tools that we have. So when you think about the newsletters that are actually going out and what the schools are sending out, you see an increased focus on attendance and also sharing what the impact is for us as a district, as we get paid on the weighted average daily attendance. So when students aren't here, we aren't receiving funding from that, the funds from that. And so right now I would say the intentional focus through those attendance meetings. And I would also add looking at sense of belonging, which is one of our core values. And so one of the, actually I'll name the middle school actually took the DESE survey data and created an additional survey that they actually give to students to ascertain around safety, but also looking at why they don't actually come to school. And I believe the elementary school is looking at disseminating something as well.
as well as the high school. I believe there's conversation to really further understand why students aren't actually coming to school. And then also for those students who aren't coming to school, removing access to leave the campus. Because when you think about some of those pieces, if you're not coming to school on time and you want to leave for lunch and you come back, those late arrivals back actually impact attendance as well. And I do want to lift out that the board has approved positions for attendance clerks in all of our buildings. So those individuals are actually able to help support the work that's happening in the building by running reports, notifying parents when children aren't at school, and having those conversations as well.
Given the data you've had access to, Ms. Ward, is it possible for us to achieve all 4 points this year?
I will need to look at our predictive spreadsheet. We run a spreadsheet every month where we calculate if they were here every single day for the rest of the year, if it was possible. I do believe, I know we could we're at 3 points right now. I will need to look at that and tell you for sure. I know we are not at the realistic target. We look at if they continue this trend, like missing 1 or 2 days a month or whatever it has been. And when we added all those, like usually the groups that we get, we were just below 90 the last time we looked.
We can bring that information back to as a part of an update.
Well, and again, I think this is, I think especially in our district, it's a little bit dehumanizing to look at the percentages here. I mean, I would hope that every building administrator knows exactly the faces of the kids that represent that gap there, because we're not talking about thousands or hundreds of kids. We're talking about, a couple dozen here that are struggling. And again, this is a district where we should be able to make accommodations for individual students to get here. And it shouldn't only fall on Vince Estrada to go pick people up and bring them to school every day, or, the extraordinary measures that various individuals have gone to.
Yeah, I've been really impressed with in the meetings I've sat in, because the topic of school avoidance and hooking up with social workers and the social emotional aspect of attendance has been one of the main topics of conversation, because that can be a significant impact on attendance, is that school avoidance. So,
Well, and I want to, first of all, I love sort of this snippet of this report, because I know M6 it's dense. We've got multiple areas that we're really focusing on, so I really love this snippet. But I also feel it's a little dehumanizing. Let's remember that while we want our points, absolutely, because it ties with our funding, can you talk a little bit about why we think attendance is important? Because that's really where hopefully, this is where the state of Missouri decided this was a benchmark, was because there's a reason. And reminding that we're not just going for the points, though it's a big deal. It's there's real reasons about effectiveness of education, building community, getting access to services, as being really crucial. So if I missed anything, please elevate
no,
that
absolutely,
for me.
you've hit it. And I think, like I said, through the pandemic, we saw the importance of that community, and that we have to rebuild that and regain and get that back again in person. But it also showed that there were other ways to learn that didn't necessarily require having to be in person in community. So I think that sense of belonging, that really trying to get students involved, connected, and part of the school community, so that we really can have the greatest impact. And that is also, so in one strategy to address attendance would be to find your students that have a chance of still giving you a point and focusing your attention on those students. And that has not been the focus of the meetings. It has been who is not coming and why. And then digging into each individual student and saying, oh, I've talked to that student. Oh, this one, they don't have a car. It has been very personal inside the building attendance meetings.
And that's one of the things I wanted to highlight, and something that the high school talked about is knowing the stories of the kids and really identifying what types of supports they need in place. We do have a group of students who struggle with some social emotional needs, and so how do we connect them with the right individuals to support them, and really being flexible regarding the supports that they get, but also creating a space where they have access to a trusted adult. And so that was one of the conversations that we had. Do the students in the high school and even in other buildings feel like they have a trusted adult where they can have a relationship? Because that's also critical, because when they have that relationship, they're more likely to actually attend school. But to answer the question that you posed, why is it important for students to come to school? When they're not here, they don't get access to content for our highly qualified staff. And so when you think about the high school and the middle school being on block scheduling, and one of the conversations we had in the middle school is that the middle school students a week only have access to 200 minutes of math instruction. So if you miss a day, that's 100 minutes. And so looking at the depth of the standards and what students need to cover, you miss 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, you really are missing out on much more than the relationships that you have with your peers, but the content that's actually being taught. So I would say you need to be here because we want you to grow into critical thinkers.
Any other questions? Thank you. Item 4.02, our construction update.
Good evening again. I'll run you through some quick construction updates. The most noticeable change you probably have realized this week is the smell outside as they are mopping the roof with hot asphalt. It's pretty awful. So apologies to the neighbors, but we're almost done. So we'll start moving rock up onto the roof either tomorrow or first part of next week. I was excited today to see color going up on walls. So we've seen some off-whites, whites, and blues going up in the building. We've got almost everything drywalled on the first and second floors. Drywall has started in the gym lobby and in the restrooms. The nurses' suite's looking real good. We've got spots for the washer and dryer now, so we're picking those things out now. Picking out TVs for the offices. Flooring is going to start being installed in the next 2 weeks. Furniture comes on the 11/20 for better or for worse. So that is another benchmark. Start getting that furniture in and installed. So we're looking pretty good. This is last week's pictures, but that crane is now gone. This is the front, the north-facing side. This is all formed up, ready to accept concrete. I believe that pour happens tomorrow. At least part of it does. This is a cool picture of the roof. The new gym roof is at the upper corner there. This is them doing some work up there. I like going up there in the mornings and enjoying the bright sky and sun from the roof vantage. I know Ed likes that perspective as well. We did bring in a 1 million BTU temp heat that we've got, so if you look out there and you hear a roar and you see 2 big pipes that looks like the ET movie, we're pumping heat in there so that the paint and mud work that they're doing during the day is dry for them the next morning. It's really important, especially as we're getting into the 40s, upper 30s. Just some basic areas here. Iron workers doing what they do. All in all, we're making pretty good progress. Lockers are in, elevators installed, waiting on inspections. Fire alarms are being installed, so there's a lot of people doing a lot of stuff. Gym floor, we've settled on the graphics for the gym floor. It's all starting to come together.
Thank you, Chris.
And another thing, that last picture Chris just showed was the separation, or the door that we're cutting between the new gym lobby and the existing gym, 22-inch thick masonry wall, and we found a pipe right in the middle of it. So that was kind of a fun surprise when I walked onto the job site Tuesday morning. But we're investigating on where that pipe goes, somewhere in the kitchen we suspect. So hopefully it's not active, but otherwise we'll have to deal with that. It's these little things when you're dealing with a 100-year-old building that sometimes we find. And I can't blame that one on anyone, because who knew there was a pipe in the middle of a 22-inch masonry wall?
Thank you, Chris. 4.03, our construction progress video update.
Give me a moment to connect, please. My short video will just be a different perspective or depiction of what Mr. Holzer was describing. Clicking on R&D and it won't, oh, never mind, I got it. False alarm. Easier to see what the courtyard is going to look like now. That's from a middle school window. It's looking just as expansive as it did before. Up to now, it looked like it was going to be smaller. So this is the gym lobby. Somebody's going to have a really great view. To get on the roof, you got to kind of do a thing like a submarine hatch over on the other side of the building, but this was the source of the smell this week. But they had good weather for this activity this week.
They don't get paid enough.
Yeah. And thanks to Manny Saldana for the drone view. Manny from maintenance. All right, I have a bonus. Now I've gotten out of the agenda, sorry. Lord. For entertainment purposes only. I don't remember Xing out of the agenda. And I can't take credit for this. Mr. Holzer arranged for this to be a thing. I'm going to put some music to it and put it on social channels sometime soon, but we captured some great sunrises and sunsets. And a little precipitation. Boom. And then it dried
How many
up.
days is that?
And then at night, it's about 3 days. More rain. So,
Wow.
Picture every 3 minutes.
yep.
That's cool.
Here we go. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 4.04, our school enrollment data presentation.
Yeah.
Well, I think so.
Enjoyed watching that video from Ed Rich. I was looking at that courtyard. I remember when I first came here, there was a parking lot, the entire courtyard, with a security guard that was sometimes awake, but not always. That was a long time ago. I'm like, oh, there used to be a parking lot. Anyway, I'm here to kind of follow up on the presentation I shared last month. Shared some preliminary enrollment numbers. We now have submitted our official enrollment count for 23-24. That's in DESI, and it'll be there in perpetuity in terms of our, so I wanted to update those numbers. And I did peel the onion a little bit and kind of drill down to some of our data to kind of share with the community. I'm Vince Estrada, Director of Student Services, and one of my areas of responsibility is kind of managing the enrollment process. So enrollment trends, there was a little bit of an adjustment. Rachel and I discovered we have a new enrollment system this year. People are pre-registering online. And so we're kind of navigating that new process. It used to be kind of a paper process. So when people were enrolling and they hadn't completed the process yet, we would kind of wait until everything was in, and then we entered them in Power School. What we learned is that when people did a pre-registration, hey, I want to enroll my kid, we were claiming them so they could access the online enrollment portal, but then they were entered as a student that was here. So we noticed there were 7 students that we thought were here last time I came, because I had 1403, but they hadn't started yet. So they were not here on enrollment. They had just started the enrollment process, so they hadn't completed it. So this is our accurate number. So we've added 20 kids in the district, but after 3 years of decline, it was nice to see it go back up again a little bit this year. So that explains the discrepancy. But you can see, like, I mean, I think I was at a meeting, but really, our district enrollment has increased 44% since 07, 08. And the answer is absolutely, yeah. The 07, 08 was a low water mark for us, but we've been growing ever since. We do a couple different levels of analysis. Grade level analysis is really comparing this year's first graders, for example, to last year's first graders. And there's some fluctuations with that because the cohort sizes are sort of hard to predict. But this information is useful for us from a planning perspective. We've got a big group coming in this year. We've got a small group of seniors, those kind of things. This is really helpful from a planning perspective, but it doesn't really speak to the trends and changes. The next slide, though, does. And so it kind of shows the fluctuation within a cohort. So, for example, the first grade, those were last year's kindergartens and this year's first graders. So we added 1 kid. So when we look at those within the same cohorts, not so much fluctuation. Probably the biggest fluctuation is the current 10th graders. We lost 9 kiddos in that grade, and we actually had 6 kids transfer to private schools from 9th to 10th, which is actually a bit unusual. I noticed when I did some digging. But you'll notice that of all the 12 grades, we had a net change of -3. So it's not really much of a fluctuation within cohorts. So pretty stable enrollment in terms of our group of kids. So I looked at the transfer analysis. I shared this last month. So where are they coming from? And it kind of breaks down. Obviously, a large percentage still come from other districts in St. Louis County, about 1/3, exactly 1/3 in fact. Some come from out of state, which I was a bit surprised about that. St. Louis City, private schools, et cetera. So it gives you a breakdown of where are our students coming from. So I shared that last month, but you asked me to look, well, where are they going to? So I dove into that this week and last. So a big majority of them, we had 92 kids transfer out, and a huge majority, 43%, went to other St. Louis County districts. And another big group went to private schools, 23. And I dug down those numbers a little bit too as well. So those were the 2 biggest groups of folks that left our district. So other St. Louis County schools, 12 of them in fact, and there are 22 in the district, including ours, and private schools. So I was curious about that. I'm like, well, let me find out more about that. So the private school transfers by grade level. I mean, it's not unusual to see kids in kindergarten do preschool here and then go to a private school. That's not such unusual. So you'll see some little bit of spikes and bumps during some building transitions. So we had 5 kiddos go from pre-K to K and go to private school. But 9th and 10th, those are, of the 22 kids that went to private schools, 10 of them were in 9th or 10th grade. And St. Louis is a high school shopping town. People take a peek at going to high school. There's different reasons why people go. They might have some legacy at a particular school. They might be interested in a particular sports program. There's different reasons why people leave. But it kind of reflects the numbers in terms of private schools. So a few in kindergarten, very little from 1st grade through 8th, and then a couple of high school kids. 11th and 12th grade didn't have any transfers to private schools. And I was interested about where kids went in the county. And so there were 12 districts represented. I don't know, I just thought that was interesting to say, where are they going in St. Louis County? So, I mean, they went to different places. Webster, our neighbor, it's interesting, Webster and Clayton are literally our border neighbors, and they had the most kids. We had 7, Webster had 6 kids, Clayton had 6 kids, and then Parkwood, which is pretty big. Second or third biggest district in the state, had 7 students. So I thought that was interesting, kind of seeing where kids are going. Any questions?
Thank you for this additional data.
No problem. It's kind of, I don't know, I find it interesting. I always like to see what's happening in our community and stuff like that. Then the second part, is there any questions? I don't want to rush. So this, Okay, so the second part of my presentation was on migrant education programming. We are asked to kind of do a program evaluation in that area of work. We have never done one before because in my many years as student services director, we've never had a student qualify as a migrant education student. One of the things that happens with that program is really about employment. It's about students whose parents seek transitional employment. So you'll see students qualify for migrant education services in more agricultural areas of the state or on areas where you may have some dairy farming and meat processing plants, et cetera, like that. But it is an important, and so in our enrollment packet, there's a series of kind of questions that strike people as a little bit odd. It's about employment. People are like, why are you asking me all these questions? If I work on a farm, I moved to the 63143, so there's no farms in here. But we do ask the questions to identify students in case they have a lot of transitions due to employment. It is an important federal program because the students change schools frequently. They're in and out of schools. They may not be here a whole school year. They may be in temporary housing. And so it really assures that they get educational services. It's similar to McKinney-Vento in that sense, except they're not homeless. They are here just temporarily. So you want to provide them a robust set of services around tutoring, access to food, all those kind of things. So it helps us identify they are and make sure we wrap around them. We just never had a student qualify as a migrant education student. But we wanted to kind of raise your awareness about that. We have a board policy about it. We have the questions. I'm still waiting for a student to qualify. Sometimes in St. Louis County, the only thing I've ever seen is when there's a big hailstorm, we'll have folks come into the area to do roofing work. And they may stay in hotels. So I have colleagues that work in Pattonville and in areas where there are kind of long-term extended stay hotels that will have students that qualify because their folks are here temporarily to do work on roofing. So if you have a big storm, you might see that. But other than that, I haven't seen too much of those folks. And there is a office in the state of Missouri that's willing to help us all the times. You got any kids? No, not yet. So, any questions about that program? And Dr. McGee helped me with my presentation. He had the same job I had. He's like, hey, here's the stuff you can do. So, as an attachment, you see the board policy and the list of questions that we have and just kind of a list of the programming we would offer if a student came to qualify. All right. Anything else?
Well, Vince, thanks for doing this and bringing it to the board and the public because it's important because St. Louis, as we all know, is a hub for migrants.
Yeah.
And alum kind of go more towards St. Louis City. As you're doing your researching and if by chance we should have it, what outside entities will you work with besides the state of Missouri to ensure that these families are getting what they need?
I probably would contact the Mel office, which they have a hub in, and they would be, and I'm not saying this, I'm not exaggerating, they would be so eager to help because they really are poised and ready to support districts if they have students that qualify. But we have a lot of students who come in as newcomers that are EL learners that have come to this country from Afghanistan, but they're not in St. Louis for employment per se as a seasonal worker. So often we'll have folks that need a lot of services in that space. They're migrants in a sense, but not because they're not here for seasonal employment. But there's an office at the RPDC that's poised and ready to help any district that has a student that qualifies. And they'll help you navigate all those things. Yeah. You're welcome. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Vince. Thank you. Item 4.06, our program evaluation for communications.
Hello. I told myself on the way into work this morning that I was going to go into board docs and do a search of the last time that a communications program evaluation was presented to this board. I didn't get around to that, but I know it's been more than 6 years, so you're overdue and you're owed this. So here we go. Communications department, we're a two-person shop. It's me and it's Lizzie Martinez, our digital marketing and media specialist. And I just want to say from the outset, I feel blessed that we have 2 full-time people in this department. I know for a fact that most similar-sized school districts don't enjoy that, so I feel lucky. Our budget is just under $227,000. It's a little over 5% increase from the year before, and that was mostly for audio-visual equipment, which we're making rampant use of. We have all kinds of platforms. We've got the website, of course. We have 5 X accounts, formerly Twitter. We have a mobile app. We use School Messenger for messages. We have 7 Facebook pages, so 1 per school, 1 for the district, 1 for the superintendent, seed to table, and I might be missing one. And then we have an Instagram account, which I want to talk about more just a little bit. And then 5 constant contact accounts, which we use for the 4 principals newsletters and the district newsletter. Real proud of what's been going on with Instagram. In a period of about 13 months, we've amassed 550 followers. And if you take the time to look at Instagram accounts by other school districts of similar size, we're way outpacing them. 1.5K people are watching Reels, the same number of posts, so we're concentrating on Reels and just regular posts. Throughout the week, I chose Monday for the most active times, but it holds true 7 days a week. Heavy viewership between 6 and 6, and we have an extraordinary number of students, both current and former, who are following us on Instagram, and they're getting their parents involved as well. So as long as we keep populating it, which we try to do every day, then we're going to continue to see this upswing. So yeah, Facebook is still a thing. I think we've trained our constituency over the years to look on Facebook for things. We have 2,552 followers. The numbers you see here are for roughly the last month. So in a 28-day period, the most recent 28-day period, more than 6,100 people saw any post at least one time. The people on Facebook for us are more than 3/4 women, and most of them are between the ages of 35 and 54. So these are the goals we set out last year for the current year: family and community engagement, and crisis management and media relations. So under that heading, we'll start with superintendent outreach, very busy area of the plan. What used to be called Snack with the Soup evolved into community conversations, because that allows us to bring in other administrators from central office, and we hold these religiously every month. We're in a regular pattern of video messages to families at the junctures that you would expect, back to school, the fall break, the winter break, spring break, when the year wraps up, and others as necessary depending upon contemporary events. The superintendent is out there. You can't not find her. She's a fixture at most city council meetings, Chamber of Commerce meetings, not just business meetings, but all of the related events. There's one coming up a week from tonight, downtown Maplewood. And then gatherings like Night Out that they have every August. And we beefed up her Facebook page, and she apparently got all of her followers from the other page to migrate over to this one. So. All right, so the next idea was to adapt the feedback we got from the spring family communication survey, and people were pretty clear about what they liked and didn't like. The principal newsletters are synced up. They all go out at roughly the same time in about an hour, 90-minute time frame, late Sunday afternoon or early Sunday evening. That's important. Before, some of them were going out at 9 in the morning and some pretty late in the evening on Sunday. So now, a parent with kids in multiple buildings is going to find them all in one area in their inbox, arriving at roughly the same time. Every newsletter has a table of contents. We heard that in the survey multiple times, dozens of times, I think. Tell us what's in this. Make me interested in this. And then each newsletter wraps up with a word about the metaphors, because that's extremely important. So when I shared the feedback with principals, I made sure that they knew that some high interest content was not so much birthdays and things like that, but options for curriculum and educational programs and safety initiatives. That was a big point of interest. I have had the pleasure, actually, of spending quite a few hours with the office administrative assistants over the past couple of months, getting them schooled on how to use School Messenger, how to use a text, when a text is appropriate, when a robocall is appropriate. Right now I'm working with School Messenger to see how I can have pre-recorded messages, and this would be helpful for attendance, so that an office administrator could have this message ready, select the parent or family that they want, and blast it out with having to re-record something all the time. So I'm still working on that. Principals' weekly newsletter stats. So I compared October to last October. The trend is up. You're going to see Mr. Zitzer's, this past week, he got a 69% open rate, which is what we look at, versus 76 last October. But if the trend chart was up here, you would see it up over the last 4 years. And while the format, the layout, with the table of contents and the principal's message and all that, those are standard. But the look is different, and that's important. I don't want to dictate that they all have to look the same, and I think they're pretty age appropriate on these. I really like them, actually. All right, so this is the district newsletter. We have 4,200, it's more than 4,200 subscribers. Again, it's opt-in. I can't make anybody receive the district newsletter. But this is MRH employees, this is families, there's a lot of alumni on there and other community members. About 1,200 of them are classified as most engaged. That means when they get the newsletter, they click it, they open it, and they start going through, and they see a link, hyperlink or something, they're going through that. Just under 900 of those 4,200 subscribers are not doing that. And the reason I bring this up is because Constant Contact has tools that allow me to reach those specific people. So I can address, in some fashion, why are you engaged or why are you not engaged? Our open rate it's up 3% from the previous 12-month period. I'll take that. But the open rate is 12% higher than the average for other schools that also use Constant Contact for their newsletters. I'll take that. 68% of our subscribers are bouncing from the newsletter to the MRH website, and they're viewing multiple pages. That's what a bounce is. It means you're finding a click, it takes you to the website, but you're not just staying for a second and saying, I forget that. They're browsing through the website. That's great. Better than the industry average, apparently. All right, continuing with family and community engagement, we're doing our best to highlight our people, and that means spotlighting achievements and accomplishments at all of the buildings, which is not as easy as it might sound because, frankly, we have squeaky wheels around here. We have people who are emailing and calling the communications department all the time and saying, hey, my class is doing this. And that's great, we want that, but some places we don't have that happening, so we've got to go out and be proactive. We're trying harder to showcase our own people. I'm so proud of a piece that Ms. Martinez put together for National Custodian Appreciation Day earlier this month, featuring our new Afghan national. His name is Isanullah Isan, works in maintenance and buildings and grounds, and he's kind of a celebrity. He's got a backstory that is pretty amazing. If you saw it, go back and read your mail from a couple weeks ago. But we've got to do more and more of that. And we've got a thing going with Special School District. It's not an agreement, but it's kind of a content sharing project where we're cross-promoting stories. They will highlight something that some of our kids are doing at South Tech, for instance. And I did a story about the kids responsible for these planters out here, and I fed that to them. So just a little mutual agreement there. Crisis management. On the website, we've enhanced what's called the safety snapshot page. It appears under the parents/students tab at the top. There's information on there about the charge that our safety committee has. There is a nice presentation that Dr. Dietrich put together on the overall district safety plan and our partnership with Strategos for training, for in-house training. And there's information in there about what kinds of communications families can expect in the event of a crisis. And there's information for staff in there as well. I have built what I think is a pretty robust archive of templates for messages that deal with subjects like lockdowns, weapons, proximal threats, something happening nearby. We've had a number of those incidents over the last year. Social media problems and health crises, just like the COVID pandemic and things like influenza. We had a great relationship with Standpoint Public Affairs. This is a consultant that the board actually approved the hiring of, who provided us a wealth of information. And this is just a little bit. I wanted to point out that under the crisis management heading, I got a treasure trove of critical incident worksheets that help me assess severity and scope, because what might seem like a crisis at the outset might not really be as severe as it appears in the beginning. We reviewed holding statements. Holding statements are when the newspaper calls or the TV station calls and they ask you a question and they want an answer right now and they want specifics and details, and you say, we'll get back to you. We're assessing the situation and stand by. I have a lot of resources about how to marshal resources, and I know that's actually part of what our operations director, Dr. Dietrich, has put into an actual plan, but some of what that I learned through this partnership with Standpoint actually did kind of wind up in the documents that Dr. Dietrich has put together for the overall safety plan. And we did a lot of learning about risk management and perceptions. You know, there are voluntary risks, there are risks that you take, there are imposed risks that you don't want but happen to you anyway, and there's also unacceptable and acceptable risk. This is fascinating reading for a guy like me who's going to have to start putting this together into a document that makes sense for my fellow administrators as well. Media relations, we really are building productive relationships with local journalists. And for those of you who don't know, I spent 30 years in local news media, so I have connections already, which gives me kind of an edge. But the key here, or the emphasis that we're taking, is getting into individuals, not just the organization. And all news organizations have a central kind of assignment desk. That's not what you want. You don't want an email. You want a face. You want a name. You want somebody on the beat. You want somebody who's going to call you by your first name, and you're going to call them by their first name. So, we're doing a lot to make sure that they are monitoring us. We get a lot of inquiries from news media just because they saw it online, which is great. The fastest way to turn off a reporter and to get them to call another school district office is to say, "Oh, we'll get back to you tomorrow. Give us a little time." No, that's not the way that news gathering works today. So it's important to facilitate quick access into our buildings and our people. Okay, so communications goals coming up. Strong family relationships. We've got to make people know that they must be involved in decision making in the future of the district. We've got to provide clear, and it has to be consistent communication to all of our stakeholders, and community engagement has to be meaningful. So let's apply the strategies. Under two-way communication, we have to eliminate the barriers that hinder full participation. We have done our best to emphasize all of the ways that you can provide feedback. If you go to the district website, there's a feedback channel right there. The newsletters that go out all have a feedback button. We are also, we're behind schedule, admittedly, but we're putting together, and when I say we, I mean my co-administrators who are authors and editors and contributors, we'll call them. We're putting together an actual newsletter that will arrive in mailboxes. We have to be able to reach the people who are outside the bounds of my regular communications tools. People who aren't on constant contact for the newsletter, who don't give a rip about Facebook or any other social media. But something that arrives in your mailbox, you're going to watch, and there are all kinds of reasons why that's important. We're trying to speak to people who may not have any direct connection to the school district, maybe have never had a child go through the school system. We've got to start talking to everybody. We have a lot of great new partnerships out there. The Masonry Institute has been terrific to us. That's the place on Big Bend, just south of Dale. They granted us, they gifted us the facility for the community roundtable event by the board, and by golly, they're going to do it again next year. Schlafly has, again, donated their space for our events with the administrators and the superintendent. We found a great new partner in Infantile Industries. This is an apparel company run by a district dad. Gave us a great deal on shirts and did a great job on the timeline of delivery and everything. Sun and Products, they donated space for some admin training. And of course, we have a great relationship with C&B, and very, very soon we're going to be announcing that the advertising and sponsorship program that I've been working on for almost 2 years now is going to be ready to go. We have people knocking at our door ready to be advertisers and to sponsor our programs. Family engagement, we've been creating more and more opportunities. We have to make ourselves available to families. So the best example of that would be the back to school fair that we launched. Thank you, Vince Estrada, for a fabulous event. And we need to encourage participation in district governments. We've got a process that's about to be rolled out for people to be involved in strategic plan committees. And of course, we have our Board of Education student liaisons, 2 of whom are here tonight. Yes, we do professional development in communications. I enjoy membership in MOSPRA and INSPRA. Lizzie Martinez is in MOSPRA, and we have money budgeted for her to be in INSPRA. I just need to get her registered. But they have fabulous resources. So MOSPRA has monthly in-person meetings, so I get to have direct interaction with my colleagues from other school districts. There's all kinds of resource sharing. It's not a day that goes by that my phone doesn't start pinging because I'm on a group me chat and someone's always checking in. Like I used it recently because Dr. McGee needed some help with an issue involving surplus items. So I get on there and it's like, hey, anybody ever been in this situation before? And then I get this flood of responses back. It's great. And then we get legislative updates from MOSPRA pretty regularly. INSPRA is a little different. They offer, well, number one, I get even on weekends, I get something called the Open Forum Digest, and it's just that. It's a collection of communications professionals from all over the country who are posing questions about best practices and what did you do about this and any recommendations on this. They have a lot of professional development webinars related to family engagement and social media best practices and storytelling tips and on and on. So, some next steps. I'm going to reissue the Family Communication Survey to ask people, okay, you answered the survey, how did we do? I'm going to add some questions about the survey process itself, and I know what you're thinking. You're going to send a survey to ask why people don't respond to surveys? Well, I'm going to take a different tack, and we're going to have some kind of a physical, like a backpack thing that goes out to families. That's not a surefire way, but it's a way to get something into the home that we know. We're going to take a sharper focus on engagement opportunities and events. I was so pleased with the product that we got from our latest partner, Catalyst Communications. This is the outfit in Baldwin that produced our strategic plan video. At first, I kind of wondered, well, why can't I do that? Why don't I do that? But we farmed it out to Catalyst, and they came back with a product that was so slick and had production value that I couldn't come anywhere near, and it was worth it. I think everybody who's seen it would agree. We can take that farther. You know, I've been producing not many, but brochures for things like you know, hiring parents as teachers, and they're adequate, but I think they could be better. And that's only because outside vendors probably have the kind of, or the level of experience that I don't have, and they know what looks good, what sells, and what doesn't. So I've already begun the awareness campaign for board briefs. I started that this week. I sent, I kind of jumped off the cliff, and I sent a direct email to all families, pre-K through 12, reminding them that the board meeting is happening tonight. Here's how you can come see it. Here's how you can watch it. Here's how you can watch it later. Here's how you can read about it in board briefs. That's the feature on the Board of Education page. So that's the directed message. You know, active is always better than passive. And then I set up a Facebook event. The idea behind that is if you make a Facebook event for, say, a board meeting, that gives somebody the option of saying going or interested, and then they get a reminder on the day of the event. And we are weekly soliciting subjects for storytelling profiles. We've got people coming to us now. And the idea is for us not to so much be the storytellers, but to let them be the storytellers. And that means video. Great example would be one of our ECC instructors, Dana Eisen, came to me and she said, hey, you know, Veterans Day is coming up. You should come talk to our custodian. He has an amazing story of military service to tell. And by golly, we're going to do it. We're going to do it because she asked us to. So we're going to do it because it's the right thing to do. And we're going to start elevating student voices. The superintendent podcast, I'm still working on it. I'm not sure if it's worth it. Other people are doing it. Some are seeing success, others aren't. I'll get back to you on the superintendent podcast. Can I answer a question or clarify anything?
I have a few questions. So is there any plan to sort of incorporate what the kids are doing in school into some of these projects? Because it seems like it would be a good opportunity for, I mean, I don't know, but maybe this is a Dr. McGee question, you know, about curriculum, and I don't know if there are any electives about communications, or, I mean, basically you'd have free labor, but also, you know, the opportunity to teach the kids how to do something.
So if I understand what you're asking, in the high school, they do have what's called the Mobile Journalism Unit. And that's under the direction of Mr. Otto Schulte-Hans. And they produce videos of varying quality, I'll say, all throughout the week. But I always post those on their page. They've got a dedicated page. It's called Mojo, Mobile Journalism. And I post those because they deserve to be posted.
Right, but I mean, I feel like this is, you know, kind of a more of a hands-on, real-world application kind of thing. So I don't know if there's any, and also too, I mean, part of the way that you get surveys answered sometimes is actually just knocking on doors, you know, actually going around. I mean, I don't even know if that's safe these days to do, but you know, sending the kids out the poll or whatever. I mean, that might be something.
Well, I think it's a very, very interesting idea to get students involved in family engagement. It would definitely be a different voice. It would be a different means of communicating. It wouldn't be, you know, some guy in a Blue Devils vest asking. It's kids. It's coming from the whole reason that we're here. So I will look into that. Thank you. It's a great suggestion. Yes, ma'am.
2 questions. So I've had some district parents of younger kids who are interested in hearing about things like when the cross-country team did the car wash. You know, so I get the high school email right as a board member, so I knew about it. But folks who are like, oh man, like I don't have a kid in the high school, but like I would have come to the car wash. And so I'm not sure where that opportunity is to, like, I think especially things that our students are doing that could be shared with younger grades. I think we have historically heard the challenge around the, like, parents of younger kids wanting to know what the experience is going to be like, you know, in the upper grades. And so, you know, whether it's, you know, if as long as the high school play this year is, you know, like appropriate for, you know, 12-year-olds to participate in, you know, and attend, like, can we make sure that that's being pushed out to, you know, families that are, you know, maybe not in the building where the event is happening. And I think it is probably mostly like the younger families getting notification of like things happening at the middle school or high school level. So that's just a sort of a curiosity and a request to maybe look into that.
I think there are missed opportunities along those lines.
The other question is, so if a parent or a community member is aware of a story, how might we share it? To say, like, I would love for you to feature this thing that happened, you know, to my student in, you know, one of our buildings, or, you know, this cool thing that my kid is doing because they've been, you know, educated as a citizen as part of the MRH, you know, curriculum.
The fastest way to do that without having to say, oh, email ed.rich at, say, go to mrhschools.net, and go down to the bottom, and there's a thing that says contact us. And that is a button that comes to me and Ms. Martinez. We're both going to get it. It won't get missed. Mm-hmm. So.
Great, because I'm sure our community has stories that, you know, could be solicited too. I appreciate that, you know, Ms. Isom and, you know, others are proactively thinking about that, but I'm sure we've got some other folks who know about gems that could be lifted up.
No doubt. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate this long overdue, as you noted.
My
great
quick
level of
search
content.
says it was 2013, the last time we had a comms program evaluation.
And this was wonderfully informative, so thank you for that, Ed.
Thank you.
Kudos on your increased Instagram engagement. I am one of those engagees. We'll move on to item 5.01, our September financial statements.
It's a tough act to follow. What I am about to share is not nearly as exciting or engaging, but nevertheless important. So here we go. September financial statements, and for those in the audience that aren't familiar with this setup here, we're always a month behind in our reporting, so it's normal that we're looking at September financial statements while we're in October. Next month in November, we'll be looking at October. Here's just a quick chart to show our funding sources or our revenue sources. You can see that 86% of our revenue comes from local sources, the largest portion of which is our local taxpayers through personal property and real estate taxes, as well as our commercial residents, or excuse me, our commercial partners. Our revenue, this says operating, our total revenue was right around 1.9 million through the end of September, and just under 6% of the budget, and is just a bit higher, mostly due to the timing of our state and federal payments. They're a little bit out of sync. Some of the payments that would typically come in the prior year came in this year, so that does skew our data a little bit, but we're a cash basis on our accounting, so when we receive the revenue is when we have to report it. So into the expenditures, salary and benefits make up 77% of our budget, and you can see the breakdown of the other portions of our expenditures. Purchase services are about $580,000, about 18% of the budget, and line up with prior years. Capital purchases are 25% and are tracking as we would expect at this point in the year when compared to the prior years. Overall, we're about 4.7, 17% of the budget, which is also in line with prior year. And here is the trend of our operating fund balance as a percent of expenditures. You can see that our fund balance is decreasing a little bit this year. Right now, budgeted at 35%. That number will move as the budget shifts up and down over the course of the year, but we expect it to stay right around this level. And that is a planned spend down as we focused on things like our employee salaries and benefits. Any questions?
All right, thank you, Chris.
Very welcome.
Before we jump into item 6.01, committee reports, I'll just draw everyone's attention to the updated grid of our committee assignments. We'll talk a little bit later about the application process for, oh, no, it's in this item, for the board committees. But first we'll get our individual committee reports. We'll start with SSD.
So we had our meeting on September 25th, and the PAC Executive Committee, which is Parent Advisory Committee, they kind of talked about the pathway to self-determination for students at different schools that are partners with SSD, what that's about, and how it's important to start having parents involved, or partnering schools, and how are schools communicating? Is that message getting to those parents? What does communication look like? Because they're trying to get more parents involved on the committee, because it's a voice for the parents, it's a voice for the students, so they really want to make sure the school districts, partnering school districts, are really getting that message out to the parents. The individual over kind of gave out her information to contact her, which is on SSD website, for parents and school districts to call to make sure they get on it. SSD kind of talked about the history and responsibility of partnering schools, since there were new members on SSD and also new board members who are part of the committee. Kind of went over the history, the importance of it, the made-up, how many districts are involved, responsibility of each partnering school district, and to ensuring that they know who their liaison are at the districts, just in case a parent needs support. And also they kind of really stressed about diversity, inclusion, and accessibility, that our students, our SSD students, are getting everything they need while they're at the school, and it's important that they have trained teachers and staff that are there for the students. So that's pretty much it.
CBTF report.
CBTF, for those of you who don't know, is Compensation Benefits Task Force. Met last night. Continues to be a robust meeting. We got through a lot in an hour and a half. The highlights of the meeting were the conversion of sick and personal days have converted to all PTO days has been completed. The MNEA, which is a teachers union, is working with their members to collective bargaining, and meeting was held with administration to discuss that process, and so that was talked about a little bit in that meeting. And then we continue to look for areas of focus that the task force wants to work on, and I believe we're leading towards benefits. That seemed like one of the key ones, and then there's a couple of others, and we're going to have some subcommittees to work on that throughout the year.
Christy, would you like to report on Joe's Place?
What I want?
Joe's Place?
It did not happen.
Okay.
It's next week.
Oh, okay. That's probably why we don't see a committee report in here. Okay. Well, then I will also note that we have a draft of a committee application form in board docs for us all to review and provide feedback to Dr. Jameson about as we look to forming our board committees around the strategic plan. We'd like to set up an instrument where we can formally accept and vet candidates who would like to participate on those committees from our community. So if there's more you'd like to add there, Dr. Jameson?
What's your timeline for that, Dr. Jameson, by the way?
So once we receive feedback, I met with Dr. Dietrich today actually to talk about the management oversight teams and how that actually aligns with the board committees. And so once Dr. McGee gets that up, I just want to highlight a couple pieces. Once feedback is received and I get a go from the board, then that information will be pushed out through our varying communication platforms. What I do want to bring to the attention is the first part of the actual application outlining the commitment for the individuals that are interested in participating. Can you blow it up a bit? And what that would be, and then also what we expect for them. It does allow the option for them to rate their preference for committees and includes contact information for references as well as for those who are interested to provide their rationale for serving on a committee and then indicating whether or not they've been on committees before in the district or had other roles on committees or subcommittees previously. And then it also gives them an opportunity to show civic engagement activities and then references that are completed. And then there's a statement at the bottom for those who do choose to submit an application to say that this information will be public because it will also be presented to the board to review for those candidates who are interested for alignment. I do like the for candidates to have the ability to select a preference. I think sometimes we select the things that we're most passionate about, but our skills and talents are probably much more suited for another committee. So versus the board saying, no, this person is not a good fit, maybe suggesting that they be on or placing them on another committee. So this will actually be an electronic form, but we also, to remove any barriers for those who may not have access to technology, we will have a paper copy as well.
Is it possible that we could also get the various city councils to talk about this as well as, like, you know, maybe put applications to libraries, police stations, you know, just around places that, you know, might not necessarily be, you know, somebody might be interested in the city council, but they might not have thought about, oh yeah, there's a school down the street.
So I meet monthly with both city managers, so that's a great time for me to actually share the information, and then also I can have Kat, my assistant, to send both of them an email with the link once we actually get the electronic version ready to go for the interested participants.
And
Dr. Jameson, I was curious about if there's any room for student action within these strategic planning committees, and if there is, would the application process be similar for them, or are we looking at something different for student voices?
That is a great question. I did not think about us. Well, let me say, I didn't think about the application process for students, but students are actually able to be on the strategic planning committee. And it's also part of the requirement for MSIP 6. So just as we went through the strategic planning process, we had student voice on that committee. So students can actually submit an application. I do need to go back and see if it's appropriate, because some students may not necessarily have an opportunity to have civic engagement or have awards or things like that that can be outlined. So we might have to modify. So stay tuned. When we meet, I'll have something for you guys.
Awesome.
Yeah, is that an appropriate ask of the PAL, like as a whole? I mean, I'm wondering if there are assignments.
Yeah, I definitely think that's something we can at least like bring to the table with our group and see if there's any interest. And at the very least, we can ensure that it gets communicated to the rest of the student body. Because my only concern with that would be like, I don't want to create like a vacuum or an echo chamber where it's only Pal Board kids, like you look up and they're everywhere. And we want to continue to like encourage participation, but we can definitely at least bring it to Pal for discussion.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in a similar way that the board is going to have representation on each committee. I mean, maybe there's like a single PAL board member and then openings for others as well. Again, y'all can hash out the details of that.
Do we know what kind of numbers we're looking at as far as like the selection, I guess, like what we'd be thinking?
I believe for the committees, we said up to, I think it was 12. Thank you. 10 to 12.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this. We have never had a process quite this formal, and so this form is feeling very formal to me. And, you know, I'm like, are we gonna check references? If we're not gonna check references, we maybe don't wanna ask for references. I know I don't have time to check everybody's references. I think I sort of get the spirit of like, can somebody else that, you know, we may not know who this person is, but could somebody else vouch for, like, this is a person who wants to be involved? I also, frankly, don't want people to feel like they have to have already been, like, an exemplary, like, involved community member to sign up for this, right? Like, you don't have to list any civic awards or anything like that to be eligible for this sort of thing. So I'm a little, again, I'm feeling a little bit like, you know, maybe there's a middle ground that's not quite so formal here. The other thing that I think we got to be really explicit about is how long is this appointment for? That doesn't appear to be on here anywhere. I think this is a 1-year appointment.
It is.
You know, which will be revisited annually by, you know, the board, and we should probably say, we will probably be starting earlier next time, but yeah, I think this is an opportunity to make sure that we have a process and make sure that we're not simply tapping the same people over and over. But I also recognize that, like, even just looking at this, I go like, oh, like this might be more questions than, you know, you have to answer if you're running for the SSD board.
These are all the questions they ask us in Maplewood when we apply for a board and commission.
All right, well, sorry, as a Richmond Heights resident, I'm not familiar with the process like this, so.
But to your point,
yeah.
it creates some pretty high barriers to participation because the form in and of itself is a little intimidating, the level of detail of requests. I think one other piece that might be helpful would be a description of the frequency of the meetings, so people are aware of the time commitment that they'll be making.
And my only concern is, will there be like an informational session or Q&A just in case, you know, a community member or someone want to be involved or want to have a little more questions? You know, I'm just thinking also, those who probably will be more involved in the school district, but they look at this application like, well, it's not for me. I don't want no one to feel like they're not part of it, especially if their kids go
Yeah.
here, things like that, because it can be intimidating, just looking at it, because they probably feel like, oh, well, they want this up here, while we're really looking for.
Right. Because I would assume if it's on there and it's asking about awards and stuff like that,
Right.
you're like, I would guess I need to have some, like, you know, why are they asking that question if that's not something they're considering in the process? So I do agree with removing some of that to make sure that the community understands that we really do want the participation, and we've got to ask certain questions to get at the background to make sure that they qualify to be on it.
And that's
But
where
other
the
than that,
information
yeah.
session would come in, so they would know and hear, you know.
Yeah, maybe we could do a pre-application webinar like the federal government likes to do for like grants or something, right?
Because I don't want, for me, I don't want anybody thinking that we're turning them down. When we talk about community engagement, the idea that we're picking like applicants or, to be committee members, I feel a little like I don't want people to feel like we're turning them away, because it might be one of the few times that they say, okay, I'm gonna reach out and try to participate,
I like the idea of, and thank you for the feedback, and we'll bring another iteration for the board to review. I don't want it to be a barrier in thinking about some of the table conversation that we had at the board community roundtable, where we continue to have a challenge with bringing our families of color to the table around decision making and how to remove some of those barriers. So I think I can address and get what we need, because one of the things I do want to continue to emphasize is ensuring that we're using the talents that people have so that they are genuinely in a place where when we begin to talk about progress monitoring or the strategies that are in place, that your passion and your work is in community engagement, but yet you're on the finance committee, which may not necessarily lend your talents to be of most benefit. So, that piece I would love to keep. I love the idea around the pre-application webinar as a means to allow people an opportunity to engage. And I think the other piece that I jotted down was to add the time commitment for that. So I will go back, revise, and actually bring this revised form back to the board for review.
One other thing too, and I'm sure that it will be a form that you can access easily from your phone, just like a laptop, but the length of it can be very deterring if it's someone that only has access to it through their phone. Because then if it's that long, you're not gonna, they might be discouraged. So I'd think about that as well, just the length of it.
Yeah.
Ways that we may be able to shorten it so that someone trying to answer these questions from their phone is not overwhelmed with a dozen pages.
So that then brings me to the piece around personal information regarding an employer and looking at access. I'm wondering if we want to revisit that, because then it could send the message that if you don't have an employer, that you don't have the opportunity to actually participate on a committee, which is not the case. I understand the rationale. Now that we're talking about it, I understand the rationale, because the place of employment may give additional context as to how they might contribute to a committee. But if I'm unemployed or a stay-at-home mom, or pick something, or a stay-at-home dad, that may be a barrier for someone too. So I think I'm going to play around with it and revise
I think you
it.
could just be more explicit about what experience or qualifications you have, right? Like maybe relevant work experience or volunteer experience, or.
Well, Dr. Jameson, are we doing like rounds of interviews, or how's this going to work? We just pick. I mean, I would rather. It seems like it would be more beneficial to the community just to have some sort of entry, like, okay, these are the people, like, here's your email, here's your phone number, here's your address, show up at this time, and then we can ask these questions.
I think you are also talking about a time commitment. I'm okay. I'm at the will of the board. So if you want to do that, I think initially the way that we've actually developed the process is that the applications are submitted. So we will have a Dropbox attached to the virtual one, so that the information doesn't have to be emailed to the board president or varying members of the board, it goes into a spreadsheet, and then you actually have the attachments there with it so that the information is easily accessible for the board to review. And so the board would then review the applications and identify those participants to be on the committees. So not necessarily interviewing, but if the full board wants interviews to take place, we can have conversation around that as well.
Well, the other question I guess I have, just a slight concern, like all this stuff is going to become public record.
It is.
And I feel like that's something that people should realize before they start giving a lot of information.
It's on the bottom, and that's.
Yeah, you might move it to the top. Yeah.
Oh, I see. I see. Okay.
And just to be very clear that if you do provide this information, it's
Top and bold.
Mm-hmm. Any other feedback or questions?
I mean, the one other thing that I'm thinking about, again, just acknowledging that like this is uncharted territory for us. I think probably ideally it would be like, okay, we have this open application period, the application period closes, we have all these candidates, we can make some assignments, right? Recognizing we're already, at the end of the first quarter of the year here, I mean, I am wondering about like the possibility of sort of having like a rolling application period this year of like, let's put it out and just see how many people we get. We may only get a handful, right? And we could appoint some people and get started, and then maybe some word of mouth helps, this grow. So I also don't think we have to get it perfect. And I appreciate that we've been willing to kind of wade through the messiness of this, but I also, what's our minimum viable product here, right? I think community involvement is important enough that I don't want this to wait until March when it's exactly as we want it to be. But that's, again, just my opinion.
I should be able to turn the feedback around by next Monday. I mean, there are small tweaks. It didn't take me a long time to create and make the modifications.
For that reason, it being the end of October, would we want to consider doing an 18-month appointment for the first round?
But here's the other thing. I don't think that we should wait for the committees to be full before we start actually holding the committees.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the work's too important to wait until we have a full roster.
So on Monday, during our COA meeting, we will be talking about the management oversight teams. Again, Dr. Dietrich got the preview today during our collaboration, but to help them to understand the cadence in between the meetings. So we will also be looking at dates for establishment to share with the board. There will be background work that will be done in between time, but these are the dates, and coinciding those dates when we actually get data. And so that's the other piece as we talk about metrics. And we just recently submitted our strategic plan, pre-planning guide to the state for reviewing, which they start in November, but part of that includes the progress monitoring on the action steps that are in the strategic plan. And so that will also give a piece for the committee to actually look at how we're evaluating that based on the metrics, because for some of them, we honestly don't have any data. So I think we're in a good spot as far as the conversations, because I think the questions will come, what data are we using and what are those metrics? And we should have something before we have our first meeting.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to potentially say this is for appointments to committees that will run through like the end of June 2025 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like we're probably, going to appoint some people by December, and we may not appoint some people until further along, right?
Got it.
Okay. Other questions, comments about committees?
Also, emails went out to board members if you have not yet received them for the liaison assignments. So the principals, I see some people excited. So please become cozy with your building principals. They're excited to have you in their buildings, not only for the school-wide events, but for example, at the high school, for those who are assigned, Mr. McCullum does first and second semester, the Better MRH pitches. I go to them every year, and the message has not changed in regards to what the students want. So new fields and tracks is one of them. So I want to continue to kind of encourage participation there. So it doesn't have to be a full, like a play or something like that, but if there are classroom-specific events that you feel you will want to participate in, the building principals will communicate that too.
Okay, I'm salivating with anticipation. When we get to student advisors.
Yes, we'll move on to item 6.02, our student advisor board report from Katie Corcoran.
All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Katie Corcoran. I'm a senior here at MRH, and I'm the vice president of our Principals Advisory Leadership Board. And today I will be presenting to you our first Principal Advisory Leadership Board report for all of you. So the first thing I wanted to do before talking about some of the progress we've made and the goals we've identified is introduce you to our 9 high school members. So going left to right for the top row, we have Neil Maxwell, a senior, Abraham Blue, a senior, Chance Taramas, who's a junior, Alex Jurassic, a senior, and Nate Boyle, a senior. And then bottom row, going right to left, we start with me, I'm a senior, Avon Crea, who's a junior, Odessa Javier, who's a junior, and then Maya Trumper, who is a junior. There are also Principals Advisory Leadership Boards that are being formed at the elementary, as well as active at the middle school and the ECC. The ECCs is about 6 kids, and the middle school is around 16, I think, and the elementary is still being formed. So one of the first things we did after finalizing our 9 members at the high school level was to isolate some people and elect people to serve in officer roles. And finding these roles have kind of allowed us to take more accountability for our action and divide our work and responsibility. So for the president and vice president role, those were elected both with internal votes and then some help from teachers and staff members at the high school level. Abraham Blue is serving as our president, and I'm serving as our vice president. And then internally, we had self-nominations, and then I did a roll call vote to identify our secretary and treasurer, who are Nate Boyle and Neil Maxwell. And then we all just unanimously elected Odessa Javier, who's a junior, for social media. She has a lot of experience. She runs social media for student council and our speech and debate programs. So we knew she would be willing to do that job. So now that we've had those officer positions identified, we've been able to move into more of an action role, and we are actually starting to make progress in our work as a group. So we've managed to pull off 4 morning meetings with our 9 kids with Ms. Huffman. In those meetings, we've talked a lot about identifying our norms, setting up our meeting schedule, as well as identifying our goals and roles, and then our next steps to achieve all of those things. Abraham and I have also had the wonderful opportunity to meet with Dr. Jamison and Ms. Huffman during 2 lunches so far as kind of like lunch and learn situations, and these have helped us to kind of gain a lot more like comprehensive understanding on what our role actually is and how to apply our work to like high level board thinking. So we've said over and over again, like the board doesn't work in the weeds. So when we're working with the board, we also have to take ourselves out of the weeds and kind of gain that high level perspective. So those lunch and learns have allowed us to kind of realize that. As far as outreach and our other PAL boards, just today we were able to meet with the ECC and the middle school, and we are continuing to follow along with the elementary school's progress. So it's bigger than just us, but we, Abraham and I, will be the only board members that actually present here. So that's a big part of our work as well. Another key thing on the next slide, yes, that we've been talking about is our roles and our goals. So we've identified a few key phrases that we've been using for our role. A lot of us see ourselves as agents of change, not only because this is a new development, this board is new, the progress we can make is new, but just in general, the students who seek out this opportunity are students who want to see change, who advocate, who have big ideas, who see and feel inspired by the potential that our district has to grow and the room that we have to improve. And with that, we've talked a lot about student voice, not only the voices we bring to the table, but the voices we have access to, how to amplify other voices, and realizing the fact that, like, even though Abraham and I are the only ones we're talking to, we have to lift up second graders' voices, elementary students' voices, middle school voices, as well as other high schoolers. So we've talked a lot about the role student voice is going to play in actually seeking change, pursuing change, and resulting in change. And with that, we've talked a lot about the term liaison. So it's not necessarily just what we want, what Abraham and I's personal objectives are, or personal visions. It's being that liaison, being that conduit for the rest of the student body to communicate with all of you. So we've talked a lot about how to suspend our participation and involvement and passion for other extracurriculars, other events or groups that we align ourselves with, and really just representing the student body as a whole and communicating the main ideas that we're getting from the student body. So the actual goals that we have, these first two of informing and explaining and our communication connections kind of go together. So we've talked a lot about how the board wants to work to dispel like student ignorance around administration proceedings. So when you look at the student body on all levels in our district, a lot of kids lack understanding on what goes on behind the scenes, how things get passed, what affects them, the fact that a lot of what we see at the building level spills down from state legislature. It's not Ms. Huffman or this board particularly. So we've talked a lot about how to kind of get rid of some of that student ignorance and increase awareness about our community and about how changes occur within public education, which fits in with Inform and Explain. And with Communication Connections, Mr. Rich just gave a great presentation on how we're working on communication as a district, but a lot of that isn't made aware of to students. Students don't realize the amount of resources that are out there, or even if they did access them, they're more geared towards a family perspective versus a student perspective. So we can come in and kind of build those connections for the student body. Another key thing that we are working towards is to exemplify the strategic plan in our school's mission as well as the district mission. So you can see this presentation is anchored around the key tenets of the strategic plan. The work we do is centered around those phrases and that mission, and we're really working to exemplify that with the projects we actually take on. And then lastly, and this will be probably our longest lasting goal, is this is the first time we've had a principal advisory leadership board at any school, especially taking it on at every school in the district at once. So we really want to be establishing strong foundation and protocols and procedures that can be repeated into the future so that this becomes a sustaining program that we can continue to see. So one of the other key components that come up in these conversations is how to make the board accessible for students. So we only have 9 members, and a lot of us are students who are typically active in extracurriculars and active in school populations. So we've talked a lot, how do we make ourselves accessible to students who have a voice, who have things to share, who experience their school on a daily basis, but don't feel comfortable putting themselves into these leadership positions, who don't want to come out here and present to the board. We've talked about how to collaborate with other extracurricular activities. If they have a leader, making ourselves available to meet with them to kind of distribute knowledge down that chain, communicating, incentivizing communication, whether that be lunch programs or some sort of treat-based system where students can feel incentivized to share their perspective. And a lot of that also comes into play when we talk about our younger students. How do we make this content accessible to them? How do we make sure they're actually understanding and what they have to share gets elevated in the right way? So we've talked a lot about that, as well as our advising role. So there's a difference between advising as a board or taking action as a board, and as an advisory board or an advisory leadership board, our job is to more instruct you all on what we are seeing in the student body, the voices we are hearing, and what good action might come from that versus taking that action ourselves. So our products and our action items will look a little different, and we've been kind of trying to define what that means for our group. So in terms of some of the outreach we've already done, again, we've talked a lot about communication channels and ways to utilize communication that already exists. So the PAL board will get a section on certain times in the principal's newsletter to share out some of the work that we're doing. Odessa has opened up a new Instagram account specifically for PALB that is going to produce content about each grade or each school's PALB group and push that out for the community. We're also working, and something I'm really excited for, is a more like student-friendly version of board briefs or like a report following their board meeting. So I keep saying, and I don't know if any of you will get this reference, but like for Sunday Night Football, like Nickelodeon has like a kid version of Sunday Night Football with like slime and like fun colors and stuff. And so I keep saying that because that's my version of like taking something that is already accessible, like anybody can turn that on, but making sure that it's more geared towards another audience and another audience that has potential for it. So producing some sort of report across our communication channels that allows students to know what is being discussed at these board meetings that actually has to do with them. So if we're talking about protocols and procedures that concern them, how do we make sure they get that from this meeting? Because none of them are going to board docs, none of them know how to access a board brief, but they do check their emails and they do use Instagram, and that is an option we have to connect. So that's something I'm really excited for. And then today we were able to meet with both the ECC and the middle school and their principal advisory leadership team. So the ECC is very energetic. There's 6 kids, they're all second graders, and they were very excited with us being there. We talked a little bit about how it might have been overwhelming for them with the like 9 kids to 6 kid ratio. So we're going to kind of adjust how we approach that group. But I think with a little more direction, they certainly have a lot to share. They're very insightful, they're very perceptive. I think they notice a lot more than we typically give them credit for. So making sure like we take those conversations seriously and we legitimize their opinions and perspectives moving forward, and we actually hear what they have to say. And with the middle school, again, this was an introductory meeting. This was the first time their group had actually gotten to get together. So we talked a lot about their motives for joining, what their vision for their group is, and some action items they see us pursuing. Again, I think a few of the students are still unclear on that like advisory versus action component of the group. So we're going to continue to work with them on defining what their role actually is. It's a much bigger board. They have 16 kids. So us having our 9 actually worked out to be a pretty solid ratio that we'll likely continue to utilize, especially because they're right here in the building. And then our last main thing, so our first like product action item that we've decided to tackle is a construction update geared towards students. So when we talk about the ignorance that students have or the lack of awareness regarding school resources and their environment, a lot of students, they're living in a construction space, they're going to school in a construction space every day, but they don't know the timeline, they don't know the progress, they don't know what the end result is supposed to look like. Some of us remember the proposition when it was first introduced, but not what it's coming to fruition as. So we have partnered with Dr. Dietrich and Mr. Holzer. It's scheduled for next Wednesday, I believe, that we are going to tour the construction site with them, gain some insight, and be able to produce some student-friendly content to increase awareness, as well as just making things like the videos that Mr. Rich has produced more accessible for the student body. And that's just like one small step that we thought was, oh, this is super easy, and we can achieve a part of that goal of dispelling student ignorance and just increasing their awareness of the environment they go to school in every day. So the actual product for that will be kind of rolled out across our social media. It'll be featured in the newsletter and any other channels that it seems fit for, and it'll be a really student-friendly approach that not only is accessible for the already existing products, but for whatever we come up with as a result of our tour. So the last thing was, when this presentation was submitted to the agenda, we did not have our username finalized because we had to find one that was still available, but we are at like mrh.palv, all lowercase, on Instagram. And Odessa did post our first post today as a summary from all the meetings we've had. So that'll be a really good way for us to connect with our peers, with parents, with other community members and stakeholders as we do our work that's like super accessible, it's visual. So we're really excited about that. And then the last thing was just if you had any questions for me.
I just had a quick question. So have y'all already gone over protocols for posting pictures of like the kids on Instagram?
Yeah, so we've talked a little bit about like our name policy, like no students would ever be named in our reports that we give here to the board. Even if a student comes to us with an issue, those identities would remain anonymous. And I know Odessa has talked about how she's going to have a conversation with Mr. Rich about those protocols a little further, because this is a much more legitimized account than the one she runs for our student council or our speech and debate, where she can just say like, hey, can I post your picture? And they'll say, sure, it's fine. So we're going to kind of make sure we have more strict protocols in place, and that anybody who has access to that account is made aware of those.
And that's actually part of their onboarding as well. So when Kat and I met, yesterday, we discussed what their onboarding would look like and looking at it through a student-focused lens. And she and I talked about some specific examples. So that will be a part that they would actually receive as well. But that's a great question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The board has done a remarkable amount of work in just a month, so kudos to all of you. This was a fantastic presentation, and it really demonstrates why this was so necessary, and we're really gratified to have you all at the table with us. Okay. Just quickly, calendar of events. The fall play, Boeing is going on tonight, tomorrow, and Saturday at 7 p.m. Tickets are $5, cash or check at the door. I wanted to lift up that the ECC is having its Trunk or Treat event on Saturday the 28th at noon. That's going to be in the parking lot at the ECC. Oh, and I missed too, the Mid-County Chamber Great Pumpkin Glow on October 26th, which is a Thursday. That's a new event for the Mid-County Chamber, and I think there's a lot of activities involved.
Including a district table, right?
That is correct. So Ed has already registered us for a district table. Each school will submit a pumpkin for the contest. I will have my pumpkin. I'm not carving it. I'm paying somebody to make sure I win. And we'll have candy to give out. I am very competitive, so no need to hide that one. But we also will be giving out swag and have information in regards to our strategic plan, as we typically do, as well as answering any questions that our community members may have.
There will be a few of us from the board attending the Missouri School Boards Association Conference Thursday, November 2nd through Saturday, the 4th. As a result, our work session on November 4th is canceled. So, second. Sorry, 2nd. That one. And we also have the district open house on Saturday, the 4th, from 10 a.m. to noon at all of the buildings, pushing this into the fall so that we can catch more families thinking about enrollment for next year. You'll remember that we had this in the spring last year.
Dr. Jamison, will you want board members to be at specific schools on that day?
I will, for those who, so I know from travel, I'll actually be leaving early in order to get back to participate. So when I meet next week with Kat, we'll have those assignments. And I'm wondering, with our board liaison positions, I'll look at those assignments actually being at those particular sites. And then where the gaps are, we'll make sure that our staff are able to help fill the gaps for that.
And those of us who will be at MSBA, I think some of us are going to wake up really early and make our way back.
Sure. Bright-eyed.
Yeah, yeah. After all of that policy education and enjoying our colleagues at the state level. Okay. I'm inclined to skip this next item, but I think we are obligated to discuss it. So we'll move on to 6.04.
Do we have a choice?
It's not an action item.
Right.
It is an action item later.
As you know, I am unfortunately but fortunately resigning because I have been appointed as a judge in the county. So I want to thank you, Katie, for one of the best meetings I've ever attended. I am so excited for everything that the board is doing, everything that you guys are doing. So proud of you. I'm going to miss you guys terribly. I'm not going to get emotional. This has been an amazing journey, and I feel like I've grown so much. I thought I was coming to just help and volunteer, and I feel like you guys have helped me. So I can't thank you enough. I'm still here. The kids are still in the district, so if you need me, maybe not for a committee, call me, and I'll be here. So you'll still see me around, so it's not a goodbye. It's just a see you later.
On a committee.
We'll have applications open
Yeah.
shortly.
Want an email on it?
I will be sure to fill that out on my phone.
Brandy, it's been such an incredible honor to serve alongside you. I remember when you came and knocked on my door in 2018, and pitched me to vote for you, and the impassioned way that you explained to me why you wanted to serve this district, to lift up and celebrate and support all students, and your service out of gratitude for what the district had done for your family, and in particular for your kids, really moved me. Like, I already knew I was going to vote for you, but you really sealed the deal with that pitch. And I just want to thank you for the mentorship that you have provided to me since I've joined the board. I'm going to miss our every other Friday coffees that we have with Dr. Jameson at Colleen's Cookies on Forsyth, if anybody wants to drop by. It's been such a growth opportunity for me to learn beside you, and really be able to take in your enthusiasm and your passion for this work. I know so many other kiddos are going to benefit from your work as you step into this new role, but we're going to miss you incredibly. So thank you for everything you've done for this district.
Thank you so much.
I think I'm thankful for your participation when I submitted my application for the position at MRH. And, you know, I frequently tell people that you find a place to serve based on your passion and also fit for your personality. And I think being allowed to authentically show up during the interview and be who I am, but also recognizing the potential in me as a first-year superintendent to come and lead in our district. And I am thankful for your guidance, your feedback. Being in this seat is challenging, but also in our current political climate, it is very difficult to lead from the space where I sit. And so I am thankful. I know where you live. You will be getting the committee form, and I will see you often and talk to you often. So thank you again for your service, not only to the board, but to our district and our community.
Sorry.
And yes, those flowers down there for you, they're from the board. So.
Well, it feels a little weird to move on to action items.
Do we say anything about the
Oh, yes, of course. I have a whole
to-
bunch of information about, see, I'm getting all caught up in my feelings
Already
too.
trying to replace me.
It's our policy to do so.
Because we have a board member resigning, this board needs to make an appointment for a replacement candidate who will serve out the remainder of Brandy's term, but also will be encouraged and invited to run for Brandy's seat in the April election. So we will be opening applications for Brandy's replacement appointment seat tomorrow or very shortly. That information will be available district-wide through email, on the public notices portion of the board website, and on the Board of Education section of the website. It will be pushed out through social media channels. It will come out in the weekly district newsletter. And again, everybody will get their own email blast from central office. So that application will be available with the supporting document requirement. Candidates will be interviewed, and an appointment will be made at a special meeting at 6:30 p.m. on Thursday, November 16th, so immediately preceding our next monthly meeting. So a requirement of candidacy is that candidates do show up at that meeting at 6:30 p.m. on November 16th, so that we potentially can interview them if there are multiple candidates. But we will be making an appointment at that meeting and doing a swearing in immediately following. So we do encourage our community members to reach out to us if you have questions, to individual board members. We're happy to meet with you, discuss the opportunity further. It is not a scary duty. It is not as demanding as you might think it is based on how long these meetings take, but it does require commitment. Katie's giving a skeptical look.
Whatever people tell you the commitment is, you have to double it.
It's true. And it is several hours of work per week, but we don't want to scare them off right when we're opening the application period. So that appointment would run through the end of this term again, which concludes in April. Candidate filing will be open for that seat as well as the 2 other seats that will be coming open at the beginning of December. The first Tuesday in December, I think, is maybe December 7th. So, any questions about that? Did I miss anything? All right. Thank you, Brandy. We don't want to replace you. You are irreplaceable.
Yeah, I'll forget about me in about 2 weeks. Thank you, guys.
Brandy who?
Right.
Not gonna happen. All right. Well, then we'll go ahead and move on to action items. Item 7.01, construction change orders. Can I get a motion in a second?
Move to approve change order number 36 as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7.02, the 2023C Board Policy Batch that was presented at our last meeting. Can I get a motion and a second?
Move to adopt policies AC, BBBA, BBF, and EF as presented by MSBA in the 2023C Policy Batch.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 7.03, Athletics JV Assistant Girls Soccer Coach appointment.
I move to approve the assistant JV girls soccer coach as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7.04, Board Member Resignation.
Move to approve the board member resignation as presented.
I don't know that you can make your own motion. Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions? Opposed? Motion carries with 1 abstention. Item 7.05, can I get a motion to move into executive session?
I move to enter executive session in accordance with section 610.021, subsections 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 13, 18, and 19, and section 610.022 of the revised statutes of Missouri on October 19th, 2023, for the following specific reasons: personnel matters, safety matters, and identifiable student matters.
Second?
Roll call vote?
Ms. Goldsmith?
Yes.
Ms. Martinez?
Yes.
Ms. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Ms. Herndon Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Whitcomb?
Yes. Meeting is adjourned at 8:52 p.m. We'll enter executive session.
Thank you.
Just get over all excited. Excellent.